Welcome to the Father on Purpose podcast, featuring author and ministry leader Kent Evans and business executive and military veteran Lawson Brown. This is a show for you, Dad. You want to be a godly and intentional father. Unfortunately, you've turned to these two knuckleheads for help. Let us know how that works out for you. Before we begin, remember this: you are not a father on accident. So go be a father on purpose. Please welcome your hosts, Kent and Lawson.
Hey guys, welcome to the Father on Purpose podcast. We are excited today to have a special guest with us that, if I am completely transparent, I didn't recognize in public, and I apologize for that. I should have. I'm walking through the Opryland Hotel with my son, Jeremy, who is 20 at the time, or 19, and Jeremy says to me, "Dad, look, that's Brant Hansen." And I go, "No way.
Come on.
Is it really?" No, true story. I'm walking through and we're at the courtyard at the, where like the little ice cream joint is and the coffee shops are at the Opryland Hotel. I was down there to go to the NRB, and my son Jeremy went along just to see the Opryland Hotel. He was in town. And so we just walk over and go, "Excuse me, are you Brant Hansen?" And so we had a quick chat and got acquainted. And then I hounded Brant mercilessly by email and begged him to come on the podcast. So today we're joined by Brant Hansen, the famous radio personality, avant-garde leader of all things amazing. And I'm so excited to have Brant with us. Lawson, for the few guys in our crowd who maybe don't yet know Brant, would you get them a bit oriented?
Absolutely. I found it interesting and got a big kick out of the fact that on Brant's website, he has two bios, and one literally says "for serious stuff" and then one real life. Check him out at branthansen.com. That's Hansen. He's a speaker, an author, books, columns. He does interviews. He's got his own radio show on 200 or more stations, and also has a podcast. So y'all go check that out. It's called the Brant and Sherry Oddcast. So I hope to hear more about that oddcast word there. I really enjoyed The Men We Need, his new book on Audible. I liked listening to it and laughed like for real out loud often. Was also moved to make some changes in my own life and think about things a little bit differently. And I plan to listen to that book again for sure.
It's about time, Lawson.
Thanks.
It's about
Yeah.
time. I've been trying to get you to make those changes.
Back to Brant, Kent. Brant is an advocate for, you're going to see how this goes, Brant. Advocate for Cure International, which that organization provides surgery and the love of Jesus for children around the world. He's done a lot of traveling, the globe for cure, even Afghanistan. And I heard a couple of humbling stories in your book, Brant, that we might touch on. Check out cure.org, CURE.org. Brant plays the flute, not sports. He thinks men are important. He believes dads are critical and has valuable insights we all can learn from. And then the last comment I'll make from his real life bio that I underlined and highlighted, I loved, says Brant is thankful for anyone who wants to be friends, but he gravitates to outcasts and weirdos because they're usually nice to him. And Brant, I totally get that. I love that you put that in writing. And frankly, it also reminded me of Jesus. Jesus specifically sought out the overlooked. And I really appreciate that you have that kind of heart as well. So welcome to the show.
Well, thank you. I think part of it is being on the spectrum. Like growing up, you never quite fit in. You're always an observer and you're watching. So I think that helps now to have a heart for people like that, because that's me too. And then people kind of self-select too. Like if you're a little bit odd, a lot of people who are cool and fashionable, they'll just select out. They'll opt out of the Brant Hansen experience. And then other people are like, "No, I get this guy." So
yeah.
So
well, dude, they're missing out if they opt out. They are missing out.
Well,
For sure.
It's an honor. And I did the two bios because you do want one professionally. Some people want a serious one, but then I'm like, here's reality. Brant doesn't actually know what he's doing.
Right.
we can have impressive resumes. We can all put together something that makes us look awesome. But the reality is I honestly don't feel like I know what I'm doing, but but God gets the credit for anything good that happens because I didn't know how to do this. And that's kind of beautiful.
But when it comes to fatherhood, Brant, you have all of the answers, right? Because that's why you're here.
Yes, the answer is 42. That's the
40.
Yeah. So the thing is that is a problem because none of us are experts really. None of us. And Jesus is the only expert. Everybody else is a novice.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he said as much in Matthew 23, but even when you're given fatherly advice or whatever, like, I think God's given me some wisdom. I've asked for it. I'm still growing. And I do think people need to help each other accrue wisdom. But I know for a fact I'm a work in progress too. So it's more of a, hey, here's what I've learned. I think these things are deeply true. Some of it's from mistakes. Some of it's from actually did make the right decision when my kids were growing up. Like that was a good call. I did a couple things really that were looking back. I'm like, that actually was, of all the mistakes I've made, I've nailed a couple of things that I'm very thankful for.
Mm-hmm.
Tell us a little bit about your family, just so guys know kind of where you are life stage wise.
Yeah. So I just became a grandpa. We have,
whoa, congrats.
Yeah. Granddaughter's downstairs right now, and she's 6 months old. My daughter and her husband live here in town with us nearby in Jupiter, Florida. And then my son's actually in med school. He's up at Yale, and he's hoping to be a surgeon. And his plan has been for a while to be a surgeon for Cure, the outfit you were talking about, where we heal the sick and tell people about Jesus. So that's his arc, and he's an awesome kid. Young man, that's what he is.
You're a good little boy. You're a good little boy going to Yale.
he just finished as an intel officer in the military. He's a captain, and he served in all over the place as a spy and stuff. So for me to call him a kid now that he's at Yale Med School and having,
oh my goodness, Lawson was Lawson's a Marine veteran.
Oh, cool.
Yeah,
awesome.
I liked what you said in the book about that. Like you've had the pleasure of being his father from when you held him as a little baby and all the way to, commissioning and seeing him go off to foreign lands to fight. And at the time, I don't think you knew exactly what he was doing. So fight and do something for our country that sure seems important. I mean, that's just the scale of magnitude that being a father like that, it really hit me the way you described it. When did all this begin for you, Brant? Like when did you have you always been Christian? Have you always been in ministry?
I'll give you a very quick, but I think it'll be interesting to people who are listening. Maybe some people can really relate to this, but I was raised in a Christian household that was very scary. Very scary. And my dad was a pastor, and there was a lot of trauma and fear, unfortunately. And I won't get into all of it, but I was scared all the time. And that, coupled with him preaching the Bible 3 times a week or whatever, and having to be all about watching, just getting sermons and then going home being scared. Right. We went through a divorce. My folks got remarried and then divorced again. And it was just trauma. It was trauma. So I remember distinctly thinking, I think I was like 12. I remember distinctly thinking, you know what, if I ever have a family, and I wondered if I would, because just not very, even then I realized I wasn't very slick with the ladies. So I thought, I know what my family's not going to be like.
Right.
I know how my kids aren't going to feel. They're not going to be scared when I come in the door. They're going to feel like dad's home. Good. Now the fun starts. And now I feel secure because he's there. Yeah. So I think for me, the arc of this book comes out of that, like trying to go, okay, I have to figure this out kind of on my own here. How's this going to work? Yeah. Where the people who are vulnerable around me actually thrive instead of cowering in fear. Like they can actually face the world because they have that kind of security. So that's where this came from.
Yeah. If I had to name just a handful of words about the men we need, that your book, I would say the things that resonated with me were protector. Mm-hmm. So what you're just saying, that and what Sherry describes in the foreword or the intro of your book about she witnessed a couple of things. She witnessed how your children and your wife looked at you and the view from their eyes were like, this is the person who is keeping me safe. He is my protector. I gravitate to him.
They feel, yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, just the other thing I was going to say is, you wrap it around this neat concept of keeper of the garden, which is a lot about growth and a lot about protecting and keeping out things that you don't want in there.
Yes, right. So I think for guys, like we've deconstructed masculinity so much, and that can be good. It can be good, but like what's the construction? And so I'm trying to offer a box top picture of the puzzle, because we have all these pieces, I feel like. And I feel like that's true in the church in general. It's like we have all these shards of masculinity. And we're not sure what the big picture is. I think that's it. It's the job that Adam was given. Specifically, Adam was given the job of keeper of the garden. And that means you're a cultivator, you're a protector. You're someone like a garden, if you think about it, species that are vulnerable could thrive in a well taken care of garden. But if they're in the wild, they don't exist. But they become these incredible blooms, and they thrive and flourish because there is a keeper who's making it happen, protecting them from enemies that want to destroy them, giving them the right environment, nutrients, sunlight to thrive. I do think that's our job. And I think that's the big picture. And so the neat thing about this, though, I'm trying to tell guys, like, I may be not the normal guy to write a man's book, since I play the accordion and the flute and I don't hunt or fish or anything like that. But it's like, but anybody can be a keeper of the garden if we accept the job. Like, our garden is our sphere of influence. Can we make a place for whoever is in our sphere of influence? They get to thrive and flourish because we're here. We make them more secure because we're here. And we can. We use our words, we use whatever we have at our disposal to make the people, the kids, the wives, like, they should feel safer because we're around. And so much of that is actually the words that we use, but it's our consistency of presence. It's our willingness to praise people. It's being a fan of our wives, fan of our kids, protecting them. So yeah, that's it.
You know, Brant, I have a friend named Dan Spader, and Dan's written some books and preached a lot. And he said a phrase one time in one of his books that was really clever. And he said, Jesus was man the way man was intended to be. Yeah. And I just love that turn of phrase, because I was with a men's group recently, and they were like, hey man, we're just getting our men's group started. What, you got any advice? And I said, yeah, base it on the character of Jesus, as opposed to this kind of hybrid of, a little bit of a Navy SEAL here, a little bit of a corporate CEO there, a little bit of a star athlete there. So much of our definition of manhood is these pieces put together in this kind of like, Picasso puzzle where you're like, something doesn't look right there. Something doesn't look right. And it's because we've tilted it toward culture's definition of manhood, as opposed to like a biblical grounded, God honoring definition of manhood. And I felt like that was throughout your whole book.
Yeah, and I say this to guys, and I really mean it's true, but it's not the reason you should do this. The reason you should do this is because God has made you for this. He really has made us for this role. And we even understand it when we're boys. Like I told my son, he was picking on our daughter. They were like 9 and 6. And Justice was picking on Julia. And it was in the back room. I just hear Julia going, Justice, and you know how it is. I go into the back room and find out what's going on, and he's just being mean. And I said, Justice, like, I'm frustrated because you're betraying your role. You're supposed to protect your little sister, right? You're supposed to protect her, not be her enemy. You shouldn't be the one picking on her. You're supposed to defend. Wow. That's your role in this family, is you defend the vulnerable. Even with the animals we have, like, you could torture. No, you defend vulnerable things. I didn't even think about it that much at the time. I just would kind of make it up on the fly, but I said the right thing. I don't think we ever had a problem again with that.
Wow.
I mean, I don't remember. I think that clicked for him. He's like, that is my job. I'm actually betraying my role. So even guys at an early age can understand it. But the thing I'm trying to tell guys in this book, women find it extremely attractive when you fill this role. Incredibly attractive. Like I've done this several times, like large groups of young adults or high schoolers or something, but I'll just show a bunch of pictures up front of guys rescuing people in different environments, or even animals, like taking a goat out of a flood. There's a couple teenage guys, or here's an older guy carrying a woman from a fire in China.
Yeah.
Here's a guy, like just random guys pulled from Google images of men rescuing. None of these guys are models. And I will ask after showing all the pictures, just kind of as an aside, just like, oh, by the way, I haven't even started the topic yet with the crowd. By the way, are these guys attractive, ladies? And there's always this visceral, yes,
Right.
from all of them.
Yeah, that's cool, man.
I'll go back through the slides, like, gentlemen, look at these guys. None of these guys have great abs. Like, what does that tell you? And I'm saying women intuit this about masculinity. This is masculinity at its best. They intuit it. So you can be ripped or have all these other puzzle pieces, but if you're missing this, they're actually going to resent you over time if you're married.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, something else you said, back to your story about Justice and Julia, where in that case, Julia was the one that was vulnerable. Something you said was, becoming a threat to the vulnerable is treason.
Yes.
And so is passivity. So I thought about that, and it is, if we are called to protect, if our role is keeper of the garden, where people feel safe to grow and thrive, if you aren't, then that's treasonous. That's the opposite. And that bystander effect, where you went through some stories of, and it's sadly kind of true, where, like if something's going on and someone doesn't do something, nobody does anything. But if one person will, others gravitate and follow. And that bystander effect, I remember from some first aid training, was why they include in that training, if you were going to act, don't just yell out, like call 911. What you do is you point at someone and say, you call 911, and that designates action, and people will then follow. But it takes someone first, and I think it's us that need to do that, us men, more often, because that's our role.
I think, see, that the passivity thing compared with the toxic domineering masculinity, I call it toxic passivity. They're really the same thing, because both of them will lead the people in your life who are vulnerable to feel insecure. Like if you're the dominating type, then you're striking fear in the hearts of the people in your family, or in the vulnerable people around you. If you're passive, insecurity breeds, because they wonder, where are you going to show up when you're needed? And your wife may not even articulate it. Your kids may not know how to articulate it, but they're insecure. That's what Adam's problem was. He didn't do anything. He's right there with Eve, and he's so passive. He doesn't intervene to defend her from the liar.
I remember every now and then I'll wake up at 3 a.m. and can't go back to sleep. And normally my behavior then is I go to Waffle House.
Sure.
This happens 2 or 3 times a year, and it's like, what are you going to do? So I'm going to go. So I remember one time being at Waffle House, and there was me, one other guy by himself who looked like he was maybe 50, roughly same age as me. And then there was a table of 3 or 4 guys who were younger, in their early 20s. And there was one lady doing all the work. And these table full of these younger guys were, rowdy and not very appropriate. Like they were using words and all this. And the whole time I was sitting there thinking, man, I wonder if I should do something. Like this feels so awkward. And I did nothing. And finally, the other 50-year-old guy stands up, walks over to their table and just goes, hey, you guys, knock it off. She doesn't want to hear all this crap. And he goes and sits back down. And I felt like such a loser. Like I really did. I was like, dag, man, that dude just did it. That was awesome. I wonder if I paid for his breakfast. I should have. Damn, I should have done something. But I just remember thinking back to like that feeling of being passive in that moment and not protecting the vulnerable, and thinking, shoot, man, I'm not going to do that again. And it was a wake up call for me. Well, that's what happens at 4 a.m. You get wake up calls. But like, I just remember thinking, man, I was passive and that other dude wasn't. Good on him. I'm glad he was here. But then I remembered, man, I hope if I'm in that position again, I'm the other guy.
I like your story because you know how it usually goes, because it's usually like, and that's when I stood up and I said,
No,
and for
I
you,
didn't.
I think that's really cool for you to go, okay, so wait, I knew something's intrinsically wrong when I didn't do it. So next time I'm
Yeah.
going to do it.
Yeah.
So my wife has helped me a lot with this because I'm not a fighter by nature or anything like that. I've got neurological problems. My eyes move back and forth. I have to move my head to see straight. Like I got balance issues, all this. But a couple times, I remember we lived in Houston. And it was July. It was July 4th or something. Maybe the 5th, maybe the day after, and it's like 10 o'clock. They're setting off fireworks down the street. A bunch of teenage guys, and our kids are trying to sleep. They're little, and I opened the door and just said, "You guys are finished." And they said, there was a silence, and some kids like, "Okay." And that was it. And I came back inside, and my wife was like, "That is the most attractive thing I have ever seen in my entire life." And I had another incident I put in the book recently, right? I didn't even do anything. I went outside to break something up, and they dispersed before I got out there. And my wife was really worried about it all, and so that's why I went out there. But I came back in, she's like, "Thank you." And I said, "I didn't even do anything." She's like, "That was so attractive." And I said, I didn't have to say it. She's like, "Yeah, but you were willing to."
Yeah.
So it's just having a home where there's peace because they know you're willing to. And you use it's oftentimes it's not just about protecting from an intruder or from people outside.
Yeah.
And I mentioned this in the book too, because it hit me powerfully from another book where a guy was saying, most of the time, like we'll pat ourselves on the back for like, well, if an intruder comes in, I would defend my wife. Like most of the time, the intruder is me.
Yeah.
It's my words, my sarcasm, my lack of response. Well, that's helped me learn, like, wait, if I'm going to be a keeper of the garden, I'm in charge of coming underneath people to help them bloom. I need to show up emotionally too. Like I'm not a super emotional guy, but I just mean say things that are
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
building.
Well,
Like
and
that.
one thing you said, Brant, in the book that was toward the end, there's a couple chapters directed kind of mainly at dads, and there is a lot of dads who would listen to this podcast. And what I would love for you to talk a little bit about, I remember there's a couple lines I pulled out of the book. One was you said your family needs you now, like when you start having kids. Yeah, you're really funny naturally, and you're good in, somehow you translate the funny personality into writing. Sometimes that breaks down, but your book was hilarious. But you said, hey, if you got kids, it may not be awesome truck season. It may be kid season. It may be time for you to focus on your family. And then at one point you said, so what, I'm supposed to just drive around in a $2,000 Corolla? And you said, probably. Like that might be exactly what you need to do. And there's a lot of guys, we're attracting to this particular show, a lot of guys who are, 35 to 60 years old. They're in the kind of the throes of building a career. They're busy, their busy badge is on their shirt and they love being busy. And would you talk a little bit to kids season, being present, just physically being present? Because I think a lot of dads really wrestle with that, and they're chasing other things right now.
Yeah. So this is wisdom. Ask God for wisdom. And my operational definition of wisdom is knowing the relative value of things. This matters this much, but this matters more. Mm-hmm. Like this shouldn't matter at all. This matters a ton.
That's
people
great.
Who get that. Yeah. So people who get that messed up, you wind up hurting people and yourself. That's called foolishness. And foolishness can mean not knowing what season of life you're in. If you have kids, that's what you said about kid season. If you have kids, it's kid season now. And so I can only share my own experience on this among, again, the dumb things I've done. One thing I did was I took a huge decision to step into a very not prestigious role when it comes to my career, where I made very little money, but I had lots of time. And we homeschooled the kids. When I say we, I mean, I did absolutely nothing. My wife did everything.
I thought you were going to talk about, you made a really bad decision, and that was to come on this podcast. That's where I thought you were going with that. So
that was a real pinpoint to me. No, it was like the best decision I've ever made. And we scraped by for the longest time, and we only had one car for a while. Then I had to pray for another one, and we scraped by. I don't know how we made it, but I wouldn't change a second of it. Like, that was the right call. And you know what's weird is, like, career-wise, God's restored all of that since it's been kid season, where I've been able to make up all the ground. I didn't need to worry at all. And my kids know me. They know me. So when they listen to my podcast, and they don't hear any disconnect like I did growing up. They're like, what I hear is my dad.
I sat down recently with Chris Harper. He's the executive director of Better Man Ministries. And I asked him a question about the state of manhood today. And his answer was both depressing and a bit hilarious. Check this out.
Yeah, it's a dumpster fire. That's what I would say the state of manhood is today. It's not just shaky, it's an absolute dumpster fire. The only categories that men are excelling in are terrible categories like incarceration, suicide rates, depression rates, not attending church, things of that nature. Women are far and ahead excelling beyond men, whether it's graduation rates, college admittance rates, professional degrees, church attendance, spiritual growth. I mean, women are dominating, and it shouldn't be like that. So what's happened to men, in the 90s, we talked a lot about passivity, like men would just be passive. And I still think that's true. Like, we wrestle with passivity, but the reality is men are slow quitting their masculinity today. They're just kind of devolving into the background and becoming non-existent. And it's a serious problem that is affecting every facet of our society.
Better Man is one of our ministry partners. We love what Chris and his team there are doing. If you or your church is looking for a group study for your men to go through that covers the essentials of biblical manhood and helps men have a clear vision of how they can be as a man, they can gain confidence, become the man they want to be, improve relationships, and create a more purposeful life, check out the resources from our friends Better Man. You can find those at betterman.com. That's betterman.com. One of my boys, Brant, said to me not long ago, he's 18, and I'm on my third book, right? And he goes, "Man, Dad, I haven't read any of your books." And we're sitting at dinner, and I'm like, and I'm kind of thinking like, I didn't know how to take it. And then he chased it with, he goes, I mean, like, basically what's in your books is what we have at home anyway. So I really don't need to read the book. Go. And I was like, yes, it's redeemed,
Yeah, right on.
Although if he were to choose to buy one, he would materially affect our sales. I mean, like, it would be, I mean, we would notice, but it was, there's times of failure, times of success. And that was a moment where I felt like, hey, I'd rather have my kid feel like he's getting me at home, the real Kent, not the fake up on, microphone Kent, the real Kent. And that felt validating in the moment.
Yeah. Well, it's nice to have some success stories too, and not just tragic stories, because there are so many tragic stories from regret, because they valued buying stuff or putting themselves in a financial situation where they had to have this job. They had to work so hard. It's like, I know it's expensive to live in the United States. I get it. But usually there's some ways that you can cut back so you're not under so much stress. And go ahead. And I say this in jest, but not totally. Because some people are like, well, what am I supposed to do? If I have that job, I'll have to live in a trailer live in a trailer with your children and your wife, and you're at peace and you're fully present. We won't be able to take vacations. Hook up the sprinkler to your trailer, and you and the trailer kids can run through the sprinkler all day long and enjoy each other's company, and they will know you as they get older.
Right.
You can have the nice truck later. Awesome truck season can kick in later on. It's okay. It doesn't have to be now.
Man.
Right. Yeah, us high A personalities can sometimes fool ourselves into, back to your comment about wisdom, knowing the relative value of things. We can misplace that value on certain things that in those moments seem right, and maybe we're fooled by culture into thinking like, yeah, but I'm doing this so that they can go to college, or I'm doing this so that they can participate in, fill in the blank sports or whatever the hobby may be. And that's not necessarily in itself a bad thing, but I guess I would caution and want to kind of underscore something that you mentioned is like, I'll paraphrase, don't let me put words in your mouth, but like, don't excuse yourself based on some imagined lack of need for a father. They need that way more than anything else that you may be thinking you're trying to prioritize.
Yeah. And you just need to show up. Like there's a loyalty thing. I talk about that in terms of spirituality, but like valuing you being involved in the kids' lives and them knowing you and you knowing them is blessing them for the rest of their lives. You pour, like the stuff you listed, skills. Okay, that's great. Skills are great. We didn't aim at skills with our kids. We availed them of stuff if they wanted to try music or sports or whatever. But I was always about, no, my job as a dad is character. That's it. And that's going to come from me being genuinely pursuing God and knowing my kid.
The quote I saw in the book, Brant, on that line was, you said, and I wrote it down, it's one of the handful I harvested for me personally, but also for today's show. You said, you're not charged with getting your kids a lucrative career. You're charged with shaping their character. Man, yep. What a great line.
That's all I was aimed at. And again, it allows you to have some time to be at peace instead of running all over the place. Cause you do like you were just saying, Lawson, like you fall into the culture's default otherwise, unless someone comes along and says, no, that's not what you're here for. And that means trying to run around and tick all these boxes when what they need is to know you.
Oh, man. Oh,
that's
okay.
So
Brant,
good.
You said something in the book, and like if guys are getting the paperback, it's on page 172. I actually bootlegged this part of your book and took a photograph of it and sent it to my wife. So my apologies.
I'm on the phone with my intellectual property lawyer and
my apologies to my friends at Baker Books, but at least 2 pages of your book have been illegally sourced across the interwebs.
Well, podcast listeners, brace yourselves. You're going to hear sirens in a few minutes. Then it'll just be me and Lawson.
Shut up, I'm recording a podcast. But truly, page 172, I don't normally get very emotional, in sermons and worship music, and I'm not the crier. But recently I was reading these 2 pages and I nearly cried. Not like a whole cry, like a you've on the inside cry. It wouldn't come all the way on the outside. And it was the pages where you talked about the cultural, you just led me here, where you're talking about the cultural, like bad rap that parenting gets in pop culture. And you had the way you went about it was like your wife is expecting, your baby is fun, the toddler is a blast, the elementary, you're a teenager. And then at the end, you're like, yep. And then there's one time they'll get it right. But you contrasted essentially the experience of a dad who's fully engaged with what culture would tell you is, parenting's awful, parenting's hard, these kids just drain your money and take your time. And I experienced that very personally. We got 5 boys, and they're 22, 20, 18, and then 11 and 7. So I've got an 18, 20, and 22-year-old. So I had 3 kids go through roughly all their teen years almost. And we never had a season with our kids in their teen years where they were just like, oh, I hate my parents. I don't ever want to be with them. My parents don't know nothing. We really never had that experience. And I think part of it, Brant, is because we just didn't give into it. Like we didn't give into that lie. All teenagers are self-absorbed, non-helpful, game station playing brats. Like we refuse to believe that's what you just have to accept when they're 15 or 16. How did you get there? Because you and I are, mentally twin separated at birth. The way you wrote these 2 pages, I nearly cried. I texted him to my wife. I was like, oh my goodness, this is us. This is us.
Yeah. Well, okay. I just enjoyed being a dad. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it, all of it. I won't say I enjoyed every second, but I mean, I enjoyed all the stages. All of it.
Remember that time?
Yeah. I mean, once I reconciled myself to it, I think when we first had the boy, it just kind of like cramped our style and our marriage and stuff. I just couldn't go, I didn't have the autonomy I had. But once I reconciled myself to, no, this is the season now.
Mm-hmm.
It was so beautiful and poetic, and it continues to get poetic. So what I was saying in that section that you were mentioning, just saying when you first are expecting, people will be like, yeah, you just wait because you're not going to get any sleep when you have that baby. It's going to be like everything's going to change. You just wait. And then you have the baby, and it's like, well, it's kind of beautiful. You enjoy it. And then the baby starts to giggle and stuff. They're like, well, you just wait till they start crawling and walking because then they're going to ransack everything. And like, yeah, but the toddler phase was nice too because they're all giggles and puppy dog tails and learning everything and saying stuff funny. They're like, well, you just wait till they start getting a little older. They'll get lippy and mouthy, and then you'll wish they were babies. You're like, no, I liked them when they were little kids too, getting to play games with them, and even playing FIFA on PlayStation or whatever. Like, I enjoyed that with them. Well, you just wait till they're teenagers because then they're going to be like into all sorts of trouble and they're going to hate you. Like, I like that too. And then when you have teenagers and you're like, I love my teenagers. They're fun. I like their senses of humor. I like who they're becoming. I like that they can beat me and stuff, and they're like, well, you just wait because when they leave, it'll break your heart. And like that one, they're right on.
Yeah, right. Yep. Totally.
Nailed that. But the rest of it's like, no, it's good. Reconcile yourself to it.
Lawson just went on a trip to see his daughter, one of whom is a Disney princess, on a cruise ship. And I think, Lawson, you had a good trip, right?
Yeah, I'm getting teary-eyed at that last little bit that you just said about when they leave, they'll break your heart. It's so true. And, I think part of what you're saying is that there are these voices a lot, not everywhere, but around us a lot. Turn on any rom-com, any sitcom, any movie, and generally speaking, you will find the buffoon dad, the broken family, the weird kid, the eyes rolling, in the parents about something their kid does or says. It's not, like, this is kind of sound silly, but like when I was growing up, Little House or Leave It to Beaver, and it was like, that's what we wanted our family to be. We wanted a dad like that. We wanted a mom that nurtured and cared. Brant, you, for this podcast, Father on Purpose, something that I want to ask you about is, I'm leading you somewhere, and it's about mouse utopia. I'll butcher the setup, but you fix it. But I want to tie it to purpose, meaning us fathers as protectors, us fathers as keeper of the garden, us fathers as, do we love our wives like Jesus did? Jesus was the ultimate example of how to treat women. But in Mouse Utopia, it was this perfect setup where the mice had everything they needed and plenty of space, plenty of room to grow, but there was no friction, there was no challenge, there was no threat. And ultimately, the male mice basically kind of turned on everybody, even though they had all the food and all the free space they needed to grow to be thousands of mice. This experiment showed that what happened was they got so big, and then they started to retaliate on one another. And I think that is what you're saying in that book is if you're investing in meaningless efforts, expect to feel meaningless. And in that space where we dads, we men are created to add value, to be the protector, where we have no meaning, where we have no purpose, where we are not a father on purpose, that's where we begin to enter territory that gets us off track.
Yeah, that mouse thing is just fascinating, and you can look it up on YouTube or whatever. It's Mouse Utopia. I forget what else it was called, Universe 25 or something. But it was an experiment to test population growth and the limits. They turned out it was fascinating what happens, like that they would just start killing each other because they had nothing else to do, like no purpose. The male mice didn't have to defend against any predators. They didn't have to find places to live for their offspring. They didn't have to do anything, find food. So they turn on each other. And I do see that that's our culture. If you don't have a vision for what we're supposed to be doing, you're going to wind up feeling listless and meaningless, and you're going to fall into all sorts of traps, because why not? Like, you have to be able to say yes to something beautiful in order to say no to the other stuff. You can't just replace it with nothing.
Right.
So having this vision to go, you know what? I'm going to be a good dad. I'm going to be plugged in with them. They are going to flourish and survive. We are going to enjoy our family. We are like, this is something worth a whole lot of saying no to other stuff for. Like,
yeah, because there's such a bigger purpose.
Yeah, that's just it. And so many guys feel listless and meaningless. Like, well, yeah, you're doing meaningless stuff, trying to preserve your autonomy, when the only actual poetry in life comes from binding yourself to people,
man,
and not leaving. That's the only poetry. You will wind up being an old person with no good stories and a lonely guy if you don't bind yourself to things that draw you out to be a man you wouldn't have been otherwise.
Yeah, right on.
That's just pure commitment, and sticking with that woman, sticking with these kids, making these decisions, like, that's golden. That's the stuff that provides the poetry.
You know, it's interesting. Like, when dads become dads, and we say this, the intro on our show says, you're not a father on accident, so go be a father on purpose. Like, you weren't picked at random. It wasn't just some like cosmic accident. That these are your kids, right? I've occasionally do men's events, and I'll say, hey, who are you discipling? And guys will have their hands up, and I'll say, how many of you have kids? And they have their hands up, and I'll say, how many of you thought those were different questions? Like, when I said, who are you discipling? You thought, oh, that dude I meet at Denny's every Saturday at 6. No, man, it's the kid you drive to school every Tuesday. Like, that's our discipleship matrix, right? Is who's God put under our roof, right under our arms? And dads get the coolest job on earth. Coolest job. I was talking with a pastor not long ago, and he's going to try to make a difference in kids leaving the faith after the age of 18. And God love him, he's not involving the parents in the process. And I was like, man, brother, I appreciate what you're doing, but the biggest firewall to people leaving the Christian faith are godly dads. And it's not because we run a podcast on the topic. It's because all the data coming out is backing up what God already told us thousands of years ago in the book of Proverbs. Dads matter a lot. So what I'd love for you to kind of land the plane with, Brant, is you're talking to thousands of dads. Hopefully tens of thousands of dads will hear this particular episode. What would you say to those dads, man? How do we encourage dads to know they are in such an important and needed role? Don't quit.
Okay, so I have some good news on this, but I want to talk about the disciple thing that you just talked about, which is your kids are being discipled.
Right.
Are you doing it, or is it the larger culture?
Right.
Somebody's doing it. Our larger culture is very effective at discipleship. They're making disciples very quickly and very effectively. So your kids are being disciples one way or the other. You should do it. But the good news I have on this, because you might think, and I wish I would have had the kids memorize more scripture when they were in their concrete stage, like really little kids. I wish I would have done more of that. But you know what I did do that was right was, even though I didn't do a lot of that, I would take them with me, and like when I would go visit a cure hospital or something, I just wanted to show them God at work in the world. So I took my son with me on some trips to Costa Rica first, and then to Africa, and then Thailand, and my daughter took her to Peru and stuff. But we'd go places. I just wanted them to see God doing things on the margins. And you don't have to go to another country to do that. I was in a nice situation where I could do stuff like that. But that was it. Like, it's seeing me in my everyday life, genuinely seeking God. It doesn't have to be this program you start. We're going to read a book at 5 a.m. You better get up, and we're going to, it doesn't have to be that. It's just you genuinely having a relationship with God, and then living like, and then intentionally having your kids spend time with you while you do that. That's it, man. And that is so powerful.
Yeah.
How do you turn away from a dad like that?
Wow.
Who shows you the world, takes you places and shows you, and he's genuinely trying to help people I mean, anybody can walk away from God. We know that. And my kids still can. They have free will. I'm convinced of it. So, but my son, I'm so proud of who he is. Like, he knows I went to Afghanistan. He winds up in Afghanistan. I work for Cure. He wants to be. He was in the OR many times, and he decided, I'm going to be a surgeon. Like, it's from those experiences. I took my daughter on a trip with Compassion International to Peru to visit a kid we sponsored. She now works full time for Compassion.
But I think something you said early, Brant, was this isn't because of Brant Hansen doing something necessarily specific that they're trying to follow now. It's because you equip them by putting them in a position to view God at work, and then Jesus did the rest.
Yes, and I didn't control or manipulate any of this. I don't have control over these people. I mean, when they're in your house, you have some, you give them more and more freedom as time goes on, and you trust them, of course. That's the goal. But it's a day. I'm telling you, it's a daily wake up, ask God to give you the resources you need for the day, and watch what He does with it.
Yeah, man.
Because I didn't have a master plan. I didn't have a big, but it's you. That'll be the discipleship process, is you being faithful in your own life and actually talking to God about stuff. And daily keep pursuing Him. Your kids will see that.
And inviting kids into your real life. Like I remember one time going on a trip to St. Louis, right? Which, no offense to my listeners in St. Louis, but like, it's not like a vacation hotspot, right? It's not like everybody goes, oh, gee, I can either go to Fiji or St. Louis. I'm going to the Arch. Right. But I remember taking my son on a business trip with me, and he had to wear a suit. He had to go to some business meetings, and nice. And I know everybody doesn't have a job where they can do that. You may work around like dangerous environments, but to the extent that you can invite your kids along in your life, you're removing this gap between the theory of you and the reality of you. Yes. And you're not a hypocrite. You just got to live your life on that road trip, and you got to be late, and you got to miss that gas station. Like, there's just things that happen, and they see the real you.
And then how are you reacting? And they're watching that the entire time. And I love that. My daughter called me out. I remember she was in high school. We went somewhere. I needed to go to the bathroom really bad. And we had to wait in a long line to check in at the hotel. And then the lady, I don't know what was going on. Oh, and then they gave me the wrong keys. I get up to the room, have to come back down. And I'm like, I need the right keys. You gave me the wrong keys. Thank you. And we get back on the elevator, and my daughter is like, you were really rude to that lady. Oh. And I was. And I was like, you're right. And so we went back down, and I went, and Julie was with me. I just said, ma'am, I'm so sorry. I should not have been rude to you. I'm being impatient, and it's not your fault. And we get back on the elevator, and we go back to the room. But
that's great.
Yeah. See, so my daughter sees me apologize.
Right.
So it's not about being perfect, but it is about having this heart that hopefully they can see that you're growing, and you're genuinely trying to grow. You're trying.
That's absolutely right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, what we're going to do is, just in case my own children are listening to this episode, Hunter, cut out that last bit about Brant apologizing. Okay. Just like, we don't need any of that. We don't need any
It's funny. I love laughing about it. Like, I got a friend who's extremely strong personality. He's got 5 kids, and he comes across way too stern sometimes, and he has these heart-to-hearts.
I'm right here, Brant. I'm right here. You don't gotta. I'm standing right here.
He has these heart-to-hearts with him. He's like, I'm so sorry that I talked to you that way. That should not have happened. And then he's telling me, like, I'm such a doofus. Like, I did this, and I had to go in and apologize. Like, dude, your kids will remember you apologizing genuinely.
Amen. Yeah, right on.
Forever.
Yeah,
that's a heart that's very difficult to turn away from. A dad who's like, that's not how I want to treat you. You deserve better than that, and I'm going to do better.
I love it, Brant. I'm so glad you got to be with us, man. I'm going to listen to your book again. I really got a lot out of that, and I'm going to share it. You guys, Dad, out there listening, BrantHansen.com, and check out The Men We Need. Brant, you're the man. Thank you so much.
Thank you. You guys are the men. Thank you so much.
Thanks for being with us, Brant. And guys, remember, please help us spread the word about the show. Give us a rating on wherever you listen to the show, and do go check out Brant's podcast, check out the book, and be the kind of dad who your kids cannot turn away from. Just that language you used there, Brant, on the show was really good, man. Be the kind of dad your kids can't turn away from. Brant, thanks a lot for joining us. We really appreciate you, brother. If we can ever serve you, please let us know.
Thank you. Honored to meet you both again. I met you before, but yeah, Lawson, nice to meet you too.
You too, bud.
See you. Bye.
Hey, Dad, thank you for listening to today's show. If you found this episode helpful, remember, you can get all the content and show notes at manhoodjourney.org/podcast. And if you really liked it, please consider doing 3 things. Number 1, share this podcast with someone. You can hit the share button in your app, wherever you listen to podcasts, or just call the person up and tell them to listen in. Number 2, subscribe to this podcast so you get episodes automatically. That helps us as well to help dads find the show. You can do that through your favorite listening app, whatever that is. And finally, review this podcast. Leave us a review, good or bad, wherever you listen. Those reviews also help other dads find the show. You can always learn more about what we're up to at manhoodjourney.org or fatheronpurpose.org. We will see you next week.
You've been dozing off to the Father on Purpose podcast featuring Kent Evans and Lawson Brown. Now, wake up. Head over to fatheronpurpose.org for more tools that can help you be a godly, intentional, and not completely horrible dad. Remember, you are not a father on accident, so go be a father on purpose.